We often talk on the show about the Founding Fathers, and we bust up the myth that they were religious, because in fact they weren't religious. Most of the founders were deists, and they explicitly were against religion in many cases. Remember, deism means you believe in a god, but not a god of any particular denomination or religion. In fact, you reject religion. And the founders set up the country as a secular nation. But usually when I'm ranting about how Christians today have this victim complex, people like Brian Fisher, Pat Robertson, for example, who we cover often, I often reference that, look, there's no reason for them to have a victim complex. They're 76% of the population, Christians are. They run everything, and they need to calm down because every president has been Christian. Well, a listener of the show reached out to me and said, look, man, I agree that these guys have this silly victim complex, but you need to check your facts because in no way has every president been Christian. So I said, okay, interesting. Oh boy, was he right. So there are some conflicting pieces of information overall in the history of the U.S. about the beliefs of some of the different presidents, but let me give you a little breakdown as to what the presidents really were. Richard Nixon and Herbert Hoover were Quakers. Now, Quakers have no set dogma, and they would probably loosely identify as Christians, but the people who would consider themselves real Christians, like the Baptists, for example, they would reject the Quakers and say they aren't real Christians immediately. They would say, no, they're not. Okay, so there's some bubble boys, let's call them. Nixon, Hoover. So -2 right from the bat. John Quincy Adams, Millard Fillmore, William Howard Taft. These guys were Unitarians. Unitarians, they're loosely Christian also, but not really because they don't believe in the Trinity. So they're not like Orthodox Christians. They don't actually believe in like one of the central tenets of Christianity. So again, bubble boys, but pretty much -4. -4 more, I should say. And then finally we get to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Tyler, and Abraham Lincoln. These guys were deists. So again, they loosely believed in a god, but not a personal god, no religion, explicitly no religion. And then you have Andrew Johnson, Rutherford B. Hayes, William Henry Harrison. They're unaffiliated. Martin Van Buren, Chester A. Arthur, Zachary Taylor, Ulysses S. Grant, and likely Dwight Eisenhower. These guys were unbelievers. In other words, atheists or agnostics. So when you tally it all up, that means that at least 18, likely 20, that we know of, or maybe even more than that, man. But we'll go with the safe number. At least 18 presidents are not traditional Christians. So the idea that this is a Christian nation, we already know that it, according to the law and the Constitution, it's not. The founders set it up as a secular nation. But even going deeper than that and going further than that, it's not a Christian nation in almost any sense of the term. Because even that 76% of the population that identifies as Christian, the overwhelming majority of them, they blow off their Christianity. They don't even know what's in their Christianity. They are, much more moderate overall. Maybe, 25% of the population, 40% at most, are actual, fundamentalists and agree with the kind of Pat Robertson ilk, or creationist ilk, if you will, about 25%. So this should be good news to all secular people. And, in the final tally, over 40% of the presidents were not Christians, were not traditional Christians.